On November 25th, 2004, a woman's world shattered with a phone call that she received from her sister. "Your daughter has been attacked." Her sister's voice trembled. As the mother listened to her daughter recount the trauma she had endured over the past 10 months, she felt a fury burning inside. Calling the police should have brought justice, yet instead, the officer rudely asked the young victim, "Are you sure you didn't seduce them first?" The perpetrator's parents added insult to injury. "If you had raised her properly, this wouldn't have happened." It seemed the entire world was against them. Would justice finally be served for this young victim, or will she continue to suffer in a world that failed to protect her? Welcome to Korean True Crime, with me, your host, Mimi Mizigo. Thank you to Vix Mack, Lala, William White, Jiwon Edwards, Nico, Elijah Hancock, Anomanom, Dr. Bob, My96, Lumos, Emma Brown, David Tafoya, Adriana, Pip, Dade512, Lisa, Veronica, Olive, Caitlin, and Missy G for your support on Patreon. Patrons vote on future episode topics and hear the episodes first with ad-free early access. A new sticker tier is being added this month, so watch out for it on any of Korean True Crime socials to join. Thank you to my patrons for making this show possible. Warning: today's episode contains discussions of the sexual assault of a minor. Listener discretion is advised. In June of 2003, Choi Sun-hee and her younger sister, Choi Bin-na, were hopelessly trying to recall a family member's phone number. They thought they had it right, but when the person on the other end picked up, it wasn't who they expected. Instead, a boy named Shin Min-soo answered. Sunny took the phone, explaining the mix-up. His number was just one digit off from the one she had intended to dial. At 14, Sunny was navigating the throes of puberty, her emotions influenced by media targeted at young girls, filled with pop stars and melodramatic stories. And Min-soo's voice held a charm that caught Sunny off guard. "You have a pretty voice," he told her, asking who she was and suggesting that they continue their conversation despite the mistake. Sunny, who attended an all-girls middle school, rarely had the chance to talk to boys. She seized the opportunity to keep talking to Min-soo. He revealed to her that he was 17 and went to an all-boys high school in Miryang. After their brief, unexpected chat, Sunny exchanged contact information with him to continue their conversation online. As they messaged each other, a bond began to form. Min-soo lived in Miryang, a city between Daegu and Busan, while Sunny lived in Ulsan, which is just east of Miryang. They talked about everything. Sunny opened up about her troubled life. She was the oldest of 3, with a younger sister and brother. Her mother had been 18 when she had Sunny, and her father was an abusive alcoholic to both her and her mother. For 14 years, Sunny's mother endured relentless abuse until she finally demanded a divorce. In January of that year, 2003, she left, but the courts denied her custody of her own children, leaving them with their abusive father. The moment her mother walked out, her father's abuse turned towards the children, especially Sunny. He was both verbally and physically abusive to her. Sunny found a lot of comfort in Min-soo. He was someone who removed her from her immediate world, a distant fantasy where she could run away to, at least within her mind. Talking to Min-soo became her only joy, the lifeline that she clung to. She had found a friend who seemed to truly understand her. After a few months of talking, he introduced her to his friend, Park Ki-bum, an 18-year-old senior in high school. In their newly formed group chat, the conversations felt really casual, as if they were genuinely trying to build a friendship with Sunny. She began to lower her guard, sharing more and more personal information, but it was all a ruse. Outside of the computer screen, Min-soo and Ki-bum were part of an already established amateur gang that was dubbed the Miryang Yonhap, Miryang Alliance. Yonhap can also mean a coalition or a union, so English translations vary. You may recognize the word Yonhap because it is also a large Korean news organization called Yonhap News. This amateur gang was entirely comprised of middle school to high school aged boys who skipped classes, smoked cigarettes in alleys, and drank in public parks in the late hours of the night. They were notorious at their schools in Miryang. Most of the boys went to a technical high school, but some of the boys were just acquaintances. Classmates would say that when someone identified themselves as part of the gang, they became untouchable. They could steal from you, assault you, without fear of consequences, and teachers and administrators turned a blind eye to all of this. These small-scale school gangs weren't uncommon. When this case became public, it drew comparisons to similar gangs from other schools, although not nearly as bad. The principal and the school officials denied any knowledge of this group, insisting that they only knew the boys as troublemakers, not as members of a juvenile gang. But many found this hard to believe, given the boys' notorious reputation and blatant misconduct right in front of faculty. The administration's claimed ignorance, whether real or not, allowed the gang's terror to continue unchecked. The core members of the group included Minsu and Kibum, who often gathered at each other's homes and watched pornography. Specifically, they searched for violent pornography, involving simulated sexual assault. Their attraction to violence towards women became something they decided to act upon. What we don't know is if Sunny was their first target, or if there were other victims before she misstyled her family member. They had first started talking in June of 2003. By January 2004, they were chatting online daily. That was when Minsu realized Sunny trusted him enough to believe anything he told her. So he told her to come visit him in Miryang. High school students went to school for much longer than middle school students, and he convinced her that he was too busy to visit her. She agreed that she would go and visit Minsu, who knew that with her alcoholic father and her mother being gone, nobody would care where she was. She got on the bus and made her way to Miryang alone. There truly was no one taking care of this 14-year-old girl. Sunny was incredibly excited. She would finally meet Minsu and Kibum, her friends, two people that she had grown incredibly close to. She even had romantic feelings for Minsu, who some people would later say they believed that the two were a couple. Her hour-long bus ride was filled with anticipation, but upon arriving, the sight that greeted her was unsettling. Minsu and Kibum were waiting, but their expressions were slightly off. Instead of being excited, their eyes resembled that of a predator, eyeing its prey. The two boys led her to a love hotel, a place notorious for its short-term stays, often used by businessmen for illicit rendezvous. Despite attempts to clean up its image, the hotel's origins as a brothel-adjacent establishment have remained. Sunny, in her innocence, likely had no idea about the boys' sinister intentions as they brought her there. When the three were alone in the motel, Kibang began to beat Sunny viciously with an iron pipe. Having already endured abuse at the hands of her father, she had hope that Minsu and Kibam would be different, that not all men would be out to hurt her. After the attack, Sunny was left unconscious, as 12 more high school boys would arrive at the motel. The gang of boys beat her and took turns sexually assaulting her, all while recording the assault with a cell phone and a camcorder, telling her that if she ever told anyone, they'd send the videos to everyone, including her family. Minsu and Kibum had talked to her for 6 months. They had connected on social media, where they could see who her family was. When Sunny returned home very late that night, she had no one left in her life to turn to. Because we don't know what Sunny was thinking or felt. We can't know what her father said when he saw the injuries she sustained or what excuse she likely had to give him. But regardless, her father didn't care. After this incident, Minsu and Kibum continued to message Sunny. But it was as if the two boys she was talking to before had vanished and had been replaced with monsters. They were entirely different people now. Sometimes they would call her home phone, and when she answered, they would shout, "We'll tell your dad if you tell anyone. However, in the meantime, Sunny didn't know that the boys had already posted the video on various uncensored forum sites. Because there was no moderation on these forums, people were able to put anything online, including those videos involving the assault of a child. It's truly sickening what is out there on the internet. In the following months, gang leaders Minsu and Kibam would force Sunny to return to Miryang. She would begin missing large portions of school that her father didn't seem to care much about. The assaults against her would only worsen with time. In groups of anywhere from 3 to 24 high school boys, they would take her to a secluded location or somewhere dark and assault her. This included more love motels, playgrounds, some of their own houses, or even a school tennis court. I want to add the context that of the perpetrators we know about, most of these boys come from well-off families. Although this doesn't add a reasoning behind their actions, it is an extra layer of the power dynamic between the young girl and these almost adult teenagers. Sunny would later say that during these assaults, the perpetrators began using adult toys and other objects to assault her. All of these conversations happened over the social media site Cyworld, a forum blog site that had avatar customization. It was very popular, much like MySpace was at the time. But then some of the boys began asking about Sunny's little sister. Binna was 12, going on 13 during the course of the assaults. She didn't know what was happening to her sister, until Minsu and Kibam contacted Sunny and told her that the next time she came, she had to bring her little sister, or all of the videos that they had taken would be sent out. Over the course of 11 visits in 10 months' time, Sunny was forced to bring her little sister and her 16-year-old cousin to Miryang to meet the boys in the Miryang Alliance. Often they would threaten the girls to bring money or jewelry with them. These 11 assaults happened between January and October 2004. Sunny was never able to tell anyone about what was happening to her, and during the trial, when asked why she hadn't told her father, she said she feared what he would do if he ever found out, which speaks a lot to what kind of father she had. Sunny and her sister had no one looking out for them. In those 10 months, 44 boys would assault Sunny, some assaulting her on multiple occasions. This doesn't include the dozens of middle school and high school boys who filmed, posted, and shared videos of the assaults. All 3 of the girls felt unable to come forward and tell someone about what was happening to them. The boys were also emotionally tormenting them by calling their home phones, just to let the girls know that they could tell their families if they wanted to. They often told the girls that they would send the videos out if they didn't come to the next visit. They didn't know that the videos were already posted online and had started to be shared more and more. Not only the boys in the Miryang Alliance had seen these videos, there were views coming from Japan, China, and the United States. Some of the perpetrators and their girlfriends started to purposefully share the videos while making posts mocking and laughing at the victims. They wrote everywhere that the victims involved enjoyed the acts and used derogatory language to insult the victims. Some of the videos even included the real names of the perpetrators and the victims, showing their faces online. The perpetrators and some of their girlfriends all used accounts with their real names attached, so their identities were also shared everywhere. After enduring almost a year of torture, Sunny attempted suicide by taking a bottle of sleeping pills, but survived the attempt and was taken to the hospital. As her stomach was pumped, the doctors did a full physical to check for any other injuries. Sunny was completely covered in bruising and some concerning scars. While doctors do have to report signs of child abuse like these, a police case was not opened. These signs are typical indicators of child abuse, which her father was indeed guilty of, but the extent of the wounds were not from her father, and regardless, the police were not called. Sunny was kept in the hospital to receive treatment for all of her wounds, and the doctors discovered damage to her genitals as well. A gynecologist was called in to help treat the wounds she had suffered internally. This is when she told her doctor that she wanted to die. Her suffering, both physically and mentally, was too much for her to bear. The gynecologist discovered scar tissue that had healed and new wounds that would tell them that multiple sexual assaults had occurred. It is shocking that this hospital visit did not lead to police involvement, and her father couldn't report the injuries he saw on her because he was also the one abusing her. After being discharged from the hospital, she returned home and retreated into isolation. The trauma she experienced was overwhelming. She began to experience debilitating panic attacks and anxiety. People around her, especially her father and teachers, had to have known something was wrong. Yet, no one intervened. During this time, her aunt visited, unaware of the horrors that Sunny Bidna and her own daughter had endured. Sunny had reached her breaking point. She could no longer conceal the truth from her aunt, someone she felt she could trust. Sunny told her aunt everything about Minsu, the meetings with the boys, the blackmail, the assaults, and the extortion. Her aunt listened and immediately called Sunny's mother. Sunny resented her mother for leaving, but she still loved her despite everything. However, the court had granted sole parental rights to her abusive father. Her mother couldn't do anything about this decision. Her aunt called Sunny's mother and told her what had happened. Her mother came over and called 112 to request a police officer to visit their house. Sunny's mother told the police officer that before they report all of the crimes, they had to guarantee something first. She demanded a promise that the police would protect the girls' identities. In Korea, victims of rape or sexual assault often face harsh treatment from the authorities, and retaliation is a concern. A woman's reputation can be irrevocably damaged, even if the perpetrator is convicted. Sunny's mother was adamant about shielding her daughters and her niece from further trauma. The Ulsan Southern Police Station assured them that the victims' identities would be kept confidential, but that promise would be quickly broken. Her mother had filed the first police report, and they told the police to move quickly because the involved boys had multiple videos of the girls, which would be classified as child sexual abuse material. According to the Act on the Protection of Children and Youth Against Sex Offenses in Korea, child sexual abuse material is any depiction of children or representations of children in film, pictures, or any other media involving sexual acts. Any person who rapes a child or juvenile shall be punished by imprisonment for an indefinite term or a term limited to a minimum of 5 years. Any person who distributes child sexual abuse material shall be punished by imprisonment for not more than 7 years. Any person who possesses child sexual abuse material, knowing that it is a child, shall be punished by imprisonment for not more than 1 year. Korea also has a juvenile act that was established in the 1950s as a way to ensure children's lives are not ruined by crimes they committed influenced by adults. Some believe the Juvenile Act to be a little bit too black and white. However, many of these perpetrators were older than 16, which means they were not exempt from punishment. They may not get prison time, but they might go to a juvenile detention center. From November 25th to December 6th, the Ulsan Violent Crimes Unit investigated privately and kept the identities of the victims hidden. On November 26th, they conducted a victim statement that lasted for 12 hours. Then again, later that evening, they started the entire process over again. A few days later, on December 3rd, they restarted the entire process once more. They didn't need to retake Sunny's testimony 3 times with different officers, and it certainly didn't need to take 12 hours every time. By December 6th, 2004, the police had compiled enough connections to the boys from phone records, online messages, and some of the videos to move forward and begin to arrest the perpetrators. The boys were so cocky about their small-time gang that they had never made their phone numbers or accounts anonymous when interacting with the victim online. Sunny was able to show the police their online accounts, and the police could easily discover their messaging forums, which at the time were not private. The Ulsan Southern Police Station began searching for the boys, many of whom had often skipped school. They searched PC rooms, public parks, libraries, and convenience stores for the 41 boys they knew of. 35 of these boys attended high school in the Miryang area across 3 high schools. They were pulled out of school and taken to the police station, awaiting their parents' arrival for questioning. The police stated that only those who participated in these sexual assaults would be arrested. It is interesting that the police chose to use the word sexual intercourse rather than the legal word for rape, and they chose to ignore the production of child sexual abuse material in their case. As well, They dismissed any charges against boys who watched or aided in the assaults as long as they didn't participate in the gang rape of a minor. Everyone knew something big was going on. Rumors began to spread that the police were busting up the Miryang Alliance gang. Students whispered to each other, wondering why these boys were being taken out of school during class in this extremely overdone display. Everyone thought the Miryang Alliance had been taken down finally after years of bullying, stealing money from other students, illegally smoking and drinking, and overall causing trouble. Many of the members had assaults on their record and had been in trouble with the schools. So while it wasn't surprising to anyone that they eventually would get in trouble, it might have actually been a huge relief. However, many of these boys came from affluent families. The boys who didn't come from rich families had parents who clearly were not involved in proper parenting, so it came as no surprise when the parents arrived at the police department in utter shock that their perfect children were in any trouble whatsoever. The parents weren't so much unaware that their children were doing bad things, but more so that they didn't care that they were, and they were upset that their children were at the police station, hurting their reputation. In recent years, Korea has had a surge of teachers quitting because of children's behavior in the classroom. We won't go into it much in this episode, but students have cursed at, injured, and blackmailed teachers. When teachers have tried to get help, they're told that this is happening because they're not a good enough teacher. Then when parents discover the teacher's complaints, the parents join in on the blackmailing and harassment, sometimes even visiting the teachers' homes to threaten them. If you're thinking, that's horrible, you're a decent person. But to these kinds of parents, their children can do nothing wrong, even if they break the law. The parents of the children in the Miryang Alliance, at least the loudest of them, demanded that the police immediately let their children go. But the police, in a vain attempt to seem like they had done so much in catching these criminals, had already held a press conference in which they told the news outlet everything they knew about this case, including revealing the name and identity of Sunny, Binna, and their cousin. The Specific Crime Reporter Protection Act was passed in 1999, which keeps victims' or accusers' identity private during investigations. So the police had already violated a law in the first days of the investigation, in an attempt to make a big story about their accomplishments. The police had promised Sunny and Binna's mother to keep their identities private, and it was legally what they should have done. And yet, this was only the beginning of the cruelty that the police would show to the victims. Prior to the arrests, the girls were told to wait for a female officer to continue their reports. It would not only make the girls feel more comfortable, but the officer they were waiting for may have been more trained to handle sex crimes. They spoke to a female officer during the first meeting, but then she left. They spoke to a female officer briefly, but then she left, and they never saw her again. When they kept asking for her to return, they were told that they were just going to have to speak to the male officers and deal with it. Although male officers can be just as knowledgeable and trained as female officers when dealing with sex crimes, it was just another betrayal in the eyes of the victims and their parents. The officer in charge of their case was less than friendly to Sunny. Her and her mother stated that the officer would tell Sunny manipulative and abusive statements, such as, "You girls went to them because you liked it." They told Sunny, a child, that she went to be raped and beaten because she enjoyed it. But his attitude towards Sunny and the other girls wouldn't change. He often tried to convince Sunny and her mother to drop the case because they were, quote-unquote, muddying the waters of Miryang and ruining the reputation of the entire city. They even asked her to conduct her interviews in a motel because all of the attention was bad for the police station. Throughout many of the interviews, Sunny was made to sit across an interrogation table from each and every one of the boys she had accused. Essentially, she had to argue her story against the boys sitting across from her. She was made to face her rapists and abusers repeatedly and describe to them what they had done to her. The following day, December 7th, arrest warrants were made for 17 of the boys who were confirmed to be involved in the sexual assaults. This includes Park Ki-bum, who appeared to be the mastermind behind the entire gang's activities, as well as Shin Min-soo and Lee Yong-hyun. Park Ki-bum and the others were held with charges of gang rape and theft of over 1 million won in valuables. In total, 11 charges were brought forward. A common tactic that has been reported by victims of sexual assault in South Korea is a lengthy process of telling the police what happened to them. This is repeated multiple times because the police hope that they'll just drop their case. Victims may need to tell multiple officers about what happened to them over the course of weeks. Sunny was called in multiple times to repeat her story, and she was kept in the interrogation room for more than 8 hours every time. And as these interrogations went on, Sunny's mother would begin to receive threats from the perpetrator's parents. These parents were absolutely vicious. Some of the parents accused Sunny of making the entire thing up, or that the acts were consensual and that she just wanted to ruin their lives to get money. The parents would block the exits of the police station, telling Sunny and her mother, "We won't let you leave." They made threats to their lives in front of the police as well, who refused to do anything to protect Sunny and her family. One of the mothers stood between Sunny and the police station exit, yelling in the little girl's face, "Go ahead and see if you have a good life. Make sure to take care of yourself." Sunny was forced to walk between crowds of the perpetrators and their parents to leave, while they verbally abused her. No effort was made to protect this little girl. It is so ironic that a country that has banned pornography access to protect women and children doesn't train their police officers to believe those very women and children when sex crimes are committed against them. This seems to be a sentiment shared amongst most women across the world. Please believe victim. Everyone involved in this investigation showed no humanity towards Sunny or the other victims. As the investigation continued, 3 more victims were found in the videos, although these girls were not yet identified. The other girls in the video appeared to be high school aged. They were also subjected to gang rape, physical assault, and extortion. As the investigation continued, the number of those who participated in gang rape was 44 boys. However, 75 other boys were present at different times involved in watching, aiding, and filming the assaults. The total number of people involved in the gang rape of underage girls was 119. But those 76 boys were not investigated due to the police's declaration they'd only be pursuing legal charges against those who engaged in sexual intercourse. When the police spoke to the public, there was no blame placed on the parents of the children or the schools for their behavior. The police consistently stated that they believed that the perpetrators were so influenced by pornography that they acted without consciousness. In a quote, an officer said, "This is a typical example of juveniles committing heinous sex crimes because they were exposed to adult porn sites." As the detectives brought in the perpetrators, the boys often told the same story. They had no idea what the Miryang alliance was. Some of the boys brought in already had tattoos that they had gotten together. Park Ki-bum protested their treatment by the police, saying that they were being targeted because of the tattoos that they had, as if they were criminals in the Yakuza with full-body sleeves. One of the perpetrators told the police he was friends with some of the other boys, but had never heard of the gang. The boys were sticking up for each other, but it wasn't just them. The Miryang Office of Education held a meeting stating that the accusations towards the boys were absurd and that there were no gangs in their education district. Schools typically have authority over crimes committed by students, so usually the police are not involved. The school has their own internal investigation board, but since this case was so large, it was being dealt with by the police. So the schools needed to combat anything that could harm the reputation of their school. I suggest perhaps preventing crimes from happening as a better method to protect your reputation. Park Hyung-min was one of the accused perpetrators and was the vice president of his technical high school. He was set to go to college soon, which was the only thing his parents cared about when trying to get his name out of the media. The majority of their online blogs were deleted once some of the boys were taken in, so most of the boys thought there was nothing the police could do. They were untouchable. But in reality, the police just didn't want anything to do with this case. The lead officer in this case often visited a noraebang, a singing room, to drink and relieve stress, As he drank and harassed the women working there, he started cursing at them. "You look just like Sunny," using the victim's full legal name. He told them, "Get out of my sight, you're ruining the taste of my food." The worker had obviously heard about this case in the news and was appalled by the officer's actions and behavior. She reached out to the victim's mother to tell her that the lead detective is revealing your daughter's information brazenly. Already at this point, women's groups had come forward to help support Sunny and the other victims in this case. When the mother reported this incident, it became a huge issue that the police department didn't want to deal with. So it led to the disbandment of the 4 detectives on the violent crimes investigation team. Then a new task force was formed with only female officers, but this was only for show. The parents of the perpetrators, when interviewed, displayed a chilling lack of empathy. "Why should I feel sorry for the victim and her family? Shouldn't she think about the damage that she has done? You need to raise your daughter better so that this doesn't happen. When girls come and flirt with boys, what boy doesn't fall for her tricks?" The sheer selfishness and callousness of the parents astounds me. It must have felt to Sunny that the entire world had turned against her, but those who cared deeply about her believed her. On December 11, 2004, a candlelight vigil was held in Seoul to condemn the perpetrators and criticize the police's handling of this case. There was humanity out there, but the evil was just so much louder. Teachers argued that the so-called Miryang alliance couldn't be real. In a city of 110,000 people, a gang of 41 boys would be impossible to not widely know about. Yet students took to the internet contradicting this. Many of them had heard of the gang, albeit less organized than the sensational news was making it out to be, and with fewer true group members. It was more of just a small gathering of friends who included others from other schools. Students shared their own encounters with the Miryang Alliance and similar gangs from other cities. One student even posted a picture of a scar that they obtained after engaging in a fight with a Miryang Alliance member. Some people online even began to start pretending to be a part of the Miryang Alliance for clout. The police, however, seemed more concerned with semantics than justice. They dismissed that any of this ever occurred, stating that the boys were not a part of a real, true gang. This focus on the minor detail of whether or not the boys were in a small gathering or a gang or just a group chat overshadowed the victim's suffering, which showed the lack of concern for the actual victim in this case. Meanwhile, the perpetrators and their parents continued to torment the victims. Sunny's full name and pictures were shared by the police to the media, which led to her receiving horrific online and in-person bullying. It was disappointing how so many adults chose to harass a child online. The messages were relentless, making her life a living hell. Her mother hired an attorney named Kang Ji-won, who at the time was a chairman of the Youth Protection Committee. He offered to represent her free of charge. Her sister was represented by Lee Mi-kyung, an attorney of the Sexual Violence Counseling Center. The 2 attorneys agreed that it would be best to move the girls to Seoul secretly, considering their faces and names had been publicly revealed. Sunny was still receiving medical treatment and was admitted to Yonsei Severance Hospital in the Department of Child Psychiatry in January of 2005. Professor Shin Yi-jin, the head of the department, was in charge of her treatment. He said, "The victim grew up, neglected from a long time. Then after being sexually assaulted, she suffered from severe depression, especially since her parents got divorced. It wasn't resolved when her mother returned. Even during treatment, she often cried, saying, 'I want to die.'" Sunny was discharged from the hospital in February 2005 after receiving treatment for a month. But at this point, she was still having suicidal thoughts. She attempted suicide a few more times, once trying to jump in front of a train. Her mother, afraid that she would one day succeed, had to commit her to a psychiatric ward to protect her daughter. While she was receiving treatment, her mother and father decided to continue with the case without her, both knowing it would be too much for her to handle. Her father had selfish motives. Her father, aunt, and uncle visited Sunny in the hospital and urged her to come to a private agreement with the perpetrators' families. This would mean accepting a large sum of money in exchange for the case against these children being dropped. Many of the parents of the perpetrators had visited Sunny's father and offered him large sums of money. Her father brought the agreement paperwork to her, and at this point, she was in no state of mind to be signing anything. She was still only 14 years old after all. But she didn't really need to agree. Her father could sign it without her consent because he had full parental rights. It was more so that she was signing a letter convincing the judge to be lenient on the perpetrators, which she was coerced into doing. Her father received a hefty sum of 50 million won as a part of the arrangement. He wasted no time in using this blood money to buy himself a house in the outskirts of Ulsan, then gave a portion to the other relatives. Not a single won made its way to Sunny or her sister. This agreement, along with the letter, effectively sealed the case's fate. Despite Sunny later expressing deep regret to her advocates about signing these documents, it was too late. When she was released from the hospital, Sunny and her mother, with the help of victim advocates, successfully secured full parental rights for her mother. Sunny and her sister moved in with her mother, finally escaping their father. Her brother, however, remained in Ulsan. Her father kept every last bit of the settlement money. Of the 44 boys who were directly involved in the sexual assaults, only 10 were indicted, meaning charged with sexual assault and other serious crimes. Of the rest, 20 boys were sent to a juvenile detention center for a very short period, but as a protective measure rather than punishment. They just had to stay until the case was over. 4 of these boys received 1 year of probation, and 16 received community service and had to take special educational courses. 13 of them were released due to the fact that they were included in the settlement Sunny was coerced to sign. Although a few of them, there was no evidence against them that showed they were involved. During the trials, the attorney representing the 10 indicted boys asked her, "If I were you, I wouldn't even want to look at Miryang after being assaulted once. So why did you go there again?" In April 2005, at the sentencing of the 10 boys being charged with sexual assault, the Ulsan District Court decided to sentence them to just 1 year of juvenile detention. This is the judge's decision why. He said, quote, "This is a case that has greatly shocked our nation. The nature of the crime is not light. As high school students that have decided on their future education or employment, and as boys with immature personalities, there is a good chance that they can be reformed, and so they will be sent to juvenile detention. Juvenile detention in Korea is considered protective detention rather than a criminal punishment. There are different forms of detention in Korea, but the most common ones are that the juvenile is placed in the care of their guardian. So essentially they're told, don't do it again, and they're returned to their parents. If their guardians are unfit, they can be placed with a public guardian like a foster parent. This is not a punishment. The second option is that the juvenile must attend lectures relating to the crime that they have committed. In this instance, many of the boys who were not indicted were made to attend a sex education and gender sensitivity lecture. The third option is to attend community service. There are many different forms of community service and different lengths of time. Typically, children do not receive a lengthy sentence for community service. Now, more serious crimes include having a probation officer or needing to stay in a juvenile protection institution away from their parents. In extreme cases, which the definition of an extreme crime in Korea is a doozy, children can be sent to a away-from-home detention center similar to a juvenile jail for between 1 month to 2 years maximum, where they attend school and just live within this juvenile facility. So not a single one of the 44 boys who actively participated in sexually assaulting 14-year-old Choi Sang-hee would have a criminal record or were punished with jail time. The Juvenile Act has sparked significant debate, and we've talked about it a lot of times. While some advocate for its necessity in protecting the future of juveniles and deterring crime, others view it as a lenient measure that offers minimal repercussions for offenders involved in very serious offenses. Notably, if the perpetrators, who were between the ages of 16 and 18, had been tried as adults, their sentences would have ranged from 5 to 8 years for the special rape of a minor over 13, 1 to 2 years for special assault, 1 to 3 years for habitual blackmail, 2 to 6 years for the production or distribution of child sexual abuse material. It is argued that each offender should have received a sentence exceeding 10 years. Even those involved solely in distributing the videos should have potentially faced a sentence ranging from 1 to 3 years. And yet, even the 10 boys who were sentenced to juvenile detention were released just in time for them to attend college. In 2005, the Miryang Sexual Violence Counseling Center surveyed 245 locals to help understand people's attitudes towards this outcome. 64% of respondents said that Sunny was responsible for the incident and blamed the victim. Many people were embarrassed by their city being shamed for victim blaming and trying to say that the survey was falsified, but the organization showed their records. People's attitudes just weren't great towards victims who came forward. It's no wonder that most women stay silent. During the sentencing trial, Sunny's mother had received a call that her ex-husband had passed away. After settling into the home purchased with the hush money meant to buy off his daughter, he wasted the rest, spending it to spiral further into alcoholism until it claimed his life through alcohol poisoning. With her abusive father no longer able to hurt her, Sunny's younger brother was reunited with them in Seoul. Sunny's mother, determined to seek justice, filed for compensation from the government for the traumatizing police investigation. In 2007, the family was awarded 40 million won for Sunny and her sister, and 10 million won for the mother, which is approximately $44,000. This compensation allowed the family to find new housing and start a new life. Yet, Sunny would never be able to move on. Her face was publicly known, and the cruelty of people would never stop. After completing middle school, Sunny transferred to a high school in Seoul, hoping anonymity would grant her some semblance of normalcy, but the search for a new school was incredibly difficult. These schools feared the bad press that would come with allowing her to enter their school. One of the school principals said, "You can't thread a moving needle," a phrase from a 19th century gynecologist who believed that a woman who didn't resist couldn't claim that they were raped. Attitudes like these have effectively silenced victims. Despite their efforts to start over, the perpetrator's parents discovered her new school. They stalked her, cornering her on school grounds. Different recollections of what happened varied. Some say they were screaming at her, some say that they were begging her to sign a petition for their children's release from juvenile detention. Terrified, Sunny fled to the washroom, hiding there until the school day ended. That day marks the last day that she would ever go to school. Her therapist recalled she was angry and said, "I was used by the world. The world did not protect me." She disappeared completely. Nobody heard anything about her for so long that people began to fear the worst. Rumors began to circulate online that she had taken her life or that she had gone missing. But her attorney, Kang Ji-won, said in an interview that she was all right. Having dropped out of school, she decided to find work to help her family. The attorney mentioned that she became attached to her computer. She often tried to escape into games and online communities. She was rarely ever away from her computer screen. If she wasn't using her home computer, she was visiting PC rooms until the sun rose. She worked a part-time job and was just going through the motions. Sunny unfortunately struggled with depression, PTSD, and eating disorders well into adulthood. To understand this behavior, according to Sapria, a child sexual abuse charity, disassociation is common in survivors of sexual abuse. A child, like Sunny, who goes through something so traumatic may begin to disconnect from their own feelings, senses, and emotions as a way to cope with the anxieties that they experience. Mild forms of disassociation are experienced by most people at some time or another. Perhaps you zone out when you're driving on the highway or daydream at work. But disassociation becomes a problem when it begins to exhibit emotional exhaustion associated with depression and physical symptoms like numbness in the body. In more severe cases, people can begin to completely separate from themselves and feel as if they're looking at their life in third person. This can lead to memory loss and the inability to take care of oneself. Sunny was experiencing disassociation in an effort to cope with the depression and PTSD she lived with every day. This escape from reality, both in her own mind and in video games, allowed her for just a moment not to be the girl who was abused. For a moment, that was just a story that she had read about or a movie she'd seen. And her life was completely different. She was just a girl sitting in a PC room playing a game. We can only hope that over time, her mental health continued to improve. The well-being of other victims remains undisclosed. Attorney Kang Ji-won, who maintained contact with all of the victims, has noted that although their lives have been challenging, they continue to persevere. The last update on their well-being was more than a decade ago. In 2012, Sunny's middle school teacher took to Facebook, shedding light on an unsettling memory. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago the post began. A student transferred to the middle school where I work. The atmosphere shifted immediately. I heard the transfer student's mother crying in the principal's office. This student turned out to be the victim of a highly controversial Miryang middle school case. Schools were reluctant to accept victims of such a public scandal. The teacher recalled their lawyer arguing with the principal that schools should welcome all students, especially those in need. As the teacher got to know Sunny, they said that they felt an endless sympathy for her. Known for their strict classroom order, the teacher softened when speaking to Sunny, hoping to see her smile again just one time. In their post, the teacher did not hide their true feelings. The perpetrators were bastards, and there was no way that this girl went with them willingly. The teacher felt sorrow for Sunny's mother, who had to settle the case to survive, being uneducated and divorced in a country that didn't respect women. The teacher referenced the book 41, which was written about the incident, and said it made them feel deeply emotional. Having seen Sunny with dark bags under her eyes, trembling in class every day, they wrote, "Sexual assault of a minor should never be forgiven or punished lightly. But our government is a mess. I'm so angry, it breaks my heart." That same year, an article revealed what sounded like a twisted joke. The girlfriend of one of the perpetrators had become a police officer. Hong Sun-mi had spread the videos and mocked the victim online. Saved chats from Cyworld accounts showed Hong Sun-mi regularly bullying the victims through posted videos and photos. Profile and group photos depicted the perpetrators as you would imagine, a group of high school bullies huddled around, eating cheap convenience store food, smoking, drinking alcohol, and wearing athletic gym clothes. The involvement of so many teen boys in this case is staggering. How did no one report the violence or sexual misconduct to teachers or parents? It is shocking that over 100 boys in a town of 110,000 people found this behavior acceptable. The fact that so many boys were okay with the assaults and the sharing of videos is a very grim reflection on society. How can we comprehend a case like this? How could so many boys exhibit such poor judgment and disregard for other human beings? Well, juvenile sex offenders have unique motives than an adult offender might have. Although there are some similarities, men are much more likely to be juvenile sex offenders and adult sex offenders than women or non-binary or intersex people. In the US, in 2022, according to the FBI, 22% of all rape offenses were committed by offenders aged 10 to 19. Juveniles have been the predominant age group committing sexual offenses over the last decade. Because kids and teens are such a broad category, it is difficult to pinpoint the trends amongst these actions. Is it their background, education, or parents? Could it be that they themselves have been subjected to sexual abuse and therefore are at a higher risk of perpetrating sexual abuse themselves? It could be all of these. Mental health disorders that include poor impulse control or inappropriate behavior are common amongst juvenile offenders. According to the Child Adolescent Psychiatric Mental Health Journal, more than half of juvenile sex offenders experience mental health disorders that impact their decision-making and impulse control. These mental health issues can stem from abuse, neglect, or frequent maltreatment. But did all 44 of these boys suffer from the same conduct disorder? Their education could also play a vital role in this behavior. When teens experience difficulty in their academics, it can be due to pre-existing unaddressed disruptive behavior, absences, attention problems, or learning disabilities. These feelings of inferiority mixed with poor home life can create strong, negative, and sometimes violent emotions that lead to a decrease in empathy for others. While many of the Miryang boys struggled academically, not all of them did. Some of these boys who were in their final year of high school had already been accepted into prestigious universities and were considered top students. However, some of these kids probably also had parents that were willing to harass teachers into giving their kids better grades. This can be known colloquially as tiger parenting, a term that was coined by Chinese-American Amy Choi, a lawyer and a scholar. Tiger parenting is an experience that resonates with many Asian children, but it's not exclusive to. It's a story in which your parents are extremely strict for you to excel academically at any cost. This means there's often little regard for the child's mental health or any regard for their behavior. Some parents do care about their children's behavior, while others don't care about what their children do as long as their academics are extraordinary. Children who experience this may be subjected to emotional abuse, sometimes even physical abuse, when their children can't perform to the parents' standards. I will say that the original meaning of the term was not used to describe abusive parenting, but the meaning has kind of run away from its origins. Many of the Miryang boys experienced this absence of their parents unless it involved their academics. Parents who cared more about which university they were accepted into rather than if their sons were sexually abusing a child. But again, not all of the boys had parents like this. Or at least, it's very unlikely that they did. The police believed that this occurred because the boys watched violent pornography. There are many studies that suggest there is a correlation between deviant sexual habits with sexually aggressive behavior. These studies looked into the idea that witnessing deviant interests early in life can form a connection when they themselves perform sexual acts. Nonetheless, they discovered that certain individuals might have a biological inclination towards violent thought because of hormonal or chemical imbalances. According to the National Institute of Health, while more than half of teenagers have viewed porn, there's actually been a decrease in the United States in sexual violence and aggression. There are some studies that suggest that the viewing of porn can decrease sexual aggression. However, research has yet to determine how pornography exposure may influence behavior later in life. The article states, there is a general agreement that any potential benefits of pornography are likely limited to content that is not violent or degrading. This would exclude the Miryang boys from the category of decreasing their sexual aggression. The conclusion of the article states that yes, they did find that violent pornography, when viewed by people under the age of 18, did increase the risk factor of teen dating violence. We as people are heavily shaped by the media that we consume, the friends that we keep, and the environment that we're raised. So it's likely that having sexually violent material readily available to their underdeveloped minds, alongside being emotionally immature and experiencing varied mental disorders, parental abuse, peer pressure, and hormonal imbalances, created a domino effect in their little gang, leading to gang raping a middle school girl. It was a perfect storm of poor choices and bad influences in which nobody thought twice about their actions. This doesn't excuse what they've done, but it may help us understand what led up to this. 12 years following the assault in 2012, one of the boys who was brought in decided to write about what occurred and their experience in the case. We can call him Ji-hoon because he doesn't give a name. He was a boy who was associated with the Miryang Alliance, but he says he had not participated in the crimes and was acquitted. Because we cannot view the court documents, we merely have to choose to either believe him or not when he says he wasn't involved. He could have been one of the boys who was excused because of the letter agreement. Ji-hoon begins by stating that anyone who wants to discuss the crime with him can add him on Kakao Talk. Curious, I did look up the account, but it no longer exists. In the police indictment that the perpetrators received, it said that Sunny had gone to visit Park Ki-bum in Miryang and started partying and drinking together. He raped her alone. Then in January, again, Park Ki-bum invited Sunny. They drank together, partied together, and then Ki-bum and another friend raped her. This would just be 2 perpetrators. Although these details don't exactly match what Sunny actually told the police, this is merely what he recalls the police telling him. Ji-hoon wrote that the status of being a sexual offender has followed him him his entire life, even if he says he has nothing to do with the case. He wrote that he believed those who were found guilty had received justice and those who didn't were innocent, but his life was being punished socially. When the personal information of those involved in the case was revealed at the time, people who were related to them started to lose their jobs or face bullying. He clarified that he believed the victim was truly the one who was suffering the greatest, but he wanted to express he was also having a hard time. Ji-hoon stayed silent about the case and that he was interrogated by the police because he thought if he protested too much, it would make him look even more guilty. He remembers that on December 6, 2004, all of the boys were taken in. He was in class at Miryang Technical High School at the time and watched as the police bus arrived. Teachers started calling students to the principal's office, and several detectives waited to question each boy as they arrived. They asked him if he knew Sunny and showed him a picture of her. He said yes, he knew her. He had a friend who was dating her. That friend was Minsu. They asked him to make a statement, and he said he would. He got on the bus with the 4 other boys. The detective asked where they could find this friend of his. Ji-hoon had the friend's number, so he called him and asked him, "Where are you?" The police drove to wherever his friend was and picked him up. They did this all day until they had the 44 boys on the bus. Finally, they drove to the Ulsan Nambu police station. Because they didn't have enough interrogation rooms, they took turns. He recalls that some of the boys were verbally abused, physically hit, or threatened by the officers. He recalls that some of the interrogations took so long because they couldn't understand the jargon that the boys were using, and had them retell their stories multiple times. Some of the boys were even just making up wild stories to confuse the police. When he was interrogated, he says that the detective started with, "Who are you with?" And he said, "My friends, these are my friends." "What did you talk about?" "I asked them where we should go hang out." "Was the victim with you then?" He said yes. "Where were you when your friends had sex with the victim?" "I was playing games in a PC room with my other friends." "Do you have any evidence of this?" And he told them, "Yes, you'll have evidence if you look at my game account and the CCTV. The boys were made to stay there overnight until the next afternoon, talking to the police and the press. 10 of the boys were released, but 30 of them had to stay. Many of them had to restart the entire progress the next day because that is when the entire investigation team was replaced after they verbally assaulted Sunny. Ji-hoon tried to respond to rumors that the victim had seduced them or that she enjoyed it, but he says it's all false. He doesn't know about the assaults or the extortion, but he had seen her around because he thought she was dating his friend, Minsu. He tried to explain the scenario he found himself in. He said, "Imagine you're drinking with a friend at a party. You go home safely, but your friend drives drunk. Your friend is arrested for a DUI, but you, someone unrelated to the situation, is also labeled as a drunk driver." He feels ashamed for being friends with a rapist, but reiterates he didn't know anything like that was happening. He says he lives with a guilty conscience that he didn't know, but that he hopes that the constant online harassment after 12 years will finally stop. He says that following the release of films based off this case like Don't Cry Mommy, Hongongju, or the TV show Signals episode about the incident, he has received endless messages on social media. Ji-hoon states that he has asked the police department to reinvestigate the case, but the chief of police who reinvestigated the boys initially has since passed away. He wants not only to prove the guilt of those involved, but to prove his own innocence. He says that as time goes by, he regrets how he treated the victim as she was at the police station. He felt angry that he was also being accused by the police of being involved, and that all of the boys were shouting together. He felt like he had to be involved. He wants the others involved to come forward and apologize to the victim, but that hadn't happened. He did say that the Miryang Alliance wasn't a real gang. The boys rode motorcycles, drank alcohol, smoked cigarettes, and acted like gangsters, but there wasn't a real gang. They weren't organized in any way. The news would refer to it as organized crime, but he says it was more of just a group of friends. He ended with an apology to the victim and wished her to have a good future. Keep in mind, he was anonymous in this letter, and there is some conflicting information as to what has been reported by pretty much everyone else in this case about what happened at the police station. The case has now been closed for 2 decades, and now the case is in the news once more. A YouTuber known by the name Narak Bogwanso, or Hell Archives, made a video naming Shin Min-soo. who was considered the mastermind behind the Miryang gang rape incident. Narak's videos had a dark humor to them, with an almost Igor-like voice and a worm sitting in a rocking chair as the embodiment of himself. He shows a slightly blurred picture of Shin Min-soo's face now from his social media, wearing a suit and tie, smiling into the camera. He states that Shin Min-soo has changed his name to Shin Jung-hyun and has been living well. The YouTuber went as far as to detail that Jung-hyun was now working as a BMW car salesman. He completely doxes the perpetrator and the video went viral. Jung-hyun lost his job and many are waiting for him to apologize to the victim publicly. Then, another comes out, naming and showing a picture of Park Ki-bum, who was the second person who was responsible for the assaults. He has since changed his name to Park Bu-sung and works at a restaurant. He also was fired from his job following the video's release. Unfortunately, netizens online also started review bombing the restaurant that he worked at. He was just a waiter at this restaurant, and now the restaurant has unfortunately closed. Park Ki-bum, or Park Bu-sung, wrote a long handwritten letter and sent it to various YouTubers covering the case. YouTube channel Chuntudoki or Combat Rabbit posted the letter. Park says he acknowledges what he did and says that he was punished for his crimes appropriately. He also made a donation of 2 million won to the Korean Sexual Violence Center. This is about $1,440. The channel used photos of him golfing and driving luxury cars alongside this small donation. Park is the only perpetrator who has come forward to apologize, but it only happened because he was named publicly. He also started his apology by apologizing to the public rather to the victim. People believe that his apology is really insincere, and I agree. This is when Hang Sung-mi, the former girlfriend of one of the perpetrators, was named. Her new name is Hang Da-hye. She was one of the girlfriends of the perpetrators who continued to defend the rapists in the trial. She is now a police officer in Miryang police station in Gyeongnam. Hang Sang-mi, now Hang Da-hye, was involved in some of the assaults, watching and even hitting the victim. She was seen in one of the videos of the incident saying, "You're so ugly," and laughing at the victim. This is a person who is now a police officer, who someone has reported their own sexual assault to. It sickens me. YouTuber Narak says that he intends to make sure no one forgets the case and that the perpetrators are never forgotten either. He wants to incite public outrage and use social punishment as a weapon. But he also says that there are more perpetrators because the parents of the rapists are also responsible. He reminds us that the parents said things like, "Why should we feel sorry for the victim?" or "You should raise your own daughter so this doesn't happen." People online have flooded the social media accounts with comments like, "Do you have a conscience?" Park Ki-bum, now Park Bu-sung, has photos with his young daughter. People have commented, "Your father's a rapist," and "This rapist cares so much for his own daughter." Comments on Narak's videos ask for every boy involved to be named. But Narak and the other YouTubers have been contacted by the police for this and asked to take down the videos. But so many news sources and pages have recorded the videos now that the information is out there. There's no putting it back in the jar. Other commenters on this ask about the victim. Does the victim want the case to be reopened? Does the victim want all of this attention? Does the victim want to see how the perpetrators are all successful and rich now? Narak has said that one of the victims has spoken to him, but there are doubts that it is Sunny. From those who do say that they know Sunny, they say that she continues to suffer from PTSD, which has made living a normal life impossible. However, some YouTubers have taken it upon themselves to get access to the verdict of the indictments, which the blog writer Jihu, who we talked about earlier, said were mostly found not guilty for him and the other boys. One of those named in the video, a Mr. Im, has since said he was merely brought in for questioning and released. But that YouTuber had cut the photo so that it didn't reveal that he was released for no evidence. So now people are questioning the release of the perpetrator's information heavily. New updates have not yet come out in the past few weeks, but if they do, I will make follow-ups on my social media accounts. In the end, justice was not served. Sunny was let down by a world that blamed her for her own sexual assaults. While there is humanity in the world, evil is drowning it out. I leave you with one request. Please believe victims. Thank you for listening to Korean True Crime. Please leave a review wherever you listen so I can continue to improve the show. 다음에 또 봐요. See you next time.